I'll be leaving and taking half of the staff with me. Envelopes scattered down in front of me. Each envelope read, "Resignation letter." Half. That means Derek must have thrown down 30 resignation letters. Nearly half of the employees leaving this company is a serious issue. It seems like karma finally caught up with you for deceiving us. You ignored my advice. And it turns out your father was just as bad of a CEO as I thought. Maybe his passing was just the consequence he deserved. Anyway, we'll be leaving this company. The sheer cruelty of his words left me in shock. I thought I had been taking Derek's concerns seriously all this time, but it seems nothing got through to him. Now indifferent to him and the others, I turned my back with a casual reply. Go right ahead. Huh? Did he really think I'd try to stop him? Derek's surprised voice reached my ears. They'll regret leaving my company soon enough. My name is Kirk. I just turned 40, and I recently took on the role of head of the General Affairs Department at a food processing company. Whether it was nepotism or not, my father, Sam, the CEO, told me it was about time I took on a managerial role. He's turning 60 this year, but he looks older than his age. Perhaps it's because he's carried the weight of responsibility for so long, but he seems tired these days. He suddenly assigned me the position of department head, which came as a complete surprise to me. I'd been working as an ordinary employee until now, so I had no idea how to manage a team. But knowing my father trusted me to handle the job, I put my all into it. This is the kind of conversation we often have. I'm planning to hand over the company to you someday. But it wouldn't be fair to make you CEO right away, so let's start with department head. I know you can handle it. Dad, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm already swamped with department head responsibilities. I'm not sure I could handle being CEO. You'll be fine. You have plenty of dependable allies by your side. Due to fatigue, my father began making mistakes on the job, and the company's reputation suffered, which gradually led to a decline in business. At that difficult time, it was Foster Foods who extended a helping hand. Their CEO, who owed my father a favor, continued to do business with us at a discount. When the deal between our companies was made, I heard it went something like this. Many years ago, when my company was on the verge of collapsing, your father helped us out. I'm just paying back that kindness. Thank you very much. You've truly saved us. Thanks to Foster Foods' support, my father's company avoided bankruptcy. With so many other partners halting their business with us, I was overwhelmed with gratitude for Foster Foods' help. On top of that, I married Molly, the daughter of the Foster Foods CEO, thanks to a certain connection. Since then, she supported me both personally and professionally. Given my busy days as a department head, her support was invaluable, especially as I tended to neglect my personal life. Though our marriage was based on mutual benefit, Molly and I got along well, and my days felt full and rewarding. One day, feeling a tinge of worry, I asked her, "We ended up in a marriage without love, are you really okay with that?" She looked slightly surprised, then smiled gently. There's no problem at all. I'd been struggling with a stalker, so this marriage was a godsend. Besides, I enjoy my time with you. Knowing she felt genuine affection toward me gave me a deep sense of relief. 1 year later, in the spring. That day marked the arrival of new hires at our company. Several were joining our department, and as their manager, I needed to guide them properly. Most of them were fresh out of school and inexperienced, so it was likely that they still had much to learn. My responsibility was to ensure they could fully demonstrate their abilities and avoid any missteps. Well, I'm heading out. Take care, and good luck. Oh, and if there's a call at home about the restaurant, could you send me an email on my work phone? I sent my personal phone in for repairs. So they might not know about the temporary number. Got it. The message I mentioned wasn't work-related, but a personal matter that I usually handle through my private phone. Since it was out for repair, I figured they'd likely call the home phone instead. I was a bit worried Molly might forget and call my personal number out of habit. With a final word to Molly, I headed out. I arrived at the office early to prepare as a department head. By around 8 a.m., the new hires started to arrive. We'd already met during the orientation, but I still felt a little nervous. "Good morning. Our company's future rests on your shoulders, so let's work together from today on." "Yes, absolutely." The new employees responded enthusiastically, showing great energy. Among them, one person stood out to me. "With me here, I'll make this company number one. I'm ready to give my all and contribute, so let's get to it." The confident new hire's name was Derek. He is a man in his 20s, raised as the only son in a prestigious family of high achievers. He performed exceptionally well in the company entrance exam, so there are high expectations for him, but there is also some concern. Confidence in oneself is generally a good thing, but he tends to be somewhat arrogant compared to others. He often looks down on others and sometimes imposes his opinions on them. In group work during the interview process, his tendency for dominance had been quite evident. He had been hired nonetheless, based on his strong potential, according to the interview panel. But I worried he might clash with others, something that didn't take long to happen. When assigned to organize some data, Derek promptly remarked, "This is such an outdated method. I'll come up with an efficient way to do this that'll help us get through the work faster." Naturally, his comment irritated the experienced employee guiding him. I stepped in to smooth things over, but the prospect of this happening repeatedly left me with a heavy feeling. I resolved to keep a close watch on him to ensure he didn't stray down the wrong path. About 30 new employees joined the company this year. With our recent growth, our workforce had nearly doubled. 5 of the new hires were assigned to my department, and they all had somewhat strong personalities. They were bright and outspoken, but Derek tended to be overly confident and impulsive, while the other 4 had a tendency to stubbornly cling to their own ideas. Once they decided something was right, they'd stick with it, so I had to be careful when teaching them the ropes. After all, if they picked up the wrong habits, it'd be tough to correct them later. Some employees are simply more challenging to train. Though I've only been in this role for a year, I can't help but respect the other department heads who deal with this every day. This method is actually better in this case. It may seem cumbersome at first, but it's reliable. Really? To me, it feels like a waste of time. I think my way would be more efficient. I feel like Derek and I have this kind of conversation constantly. Derek, with his sharp mind, always comes up with methods that cater to highly skilled workers. But not everyone operates that way, the standard methods exist for a reason. However, no matter how much I explained, Derek seemed unwilling to listen, and his gaze grew colder with each passing day. The constant strain from this situation wore on me mentally, even if I wasn't physically exhausted. It became apparent enough that even Molly noticed my fatigue. "It seems like you've had a rough day." Molly greeted me at the door, offering a sympathetic smile as she noticed the exhaustion on my face. Before we got married, Molly had worked as the daughter of a company president. But now she took care of everything at home as a full-time homemaker. After enjoying the meal she had prepared, I shared with her the events that had taken place during the day. Molly, who had been listening quietly, suddenly remarked, "Come to think of it," as she recalled something from the past. "When I was working, there was a manager who stalked me, and he had the same last name. He had a son named Derek, if I remember correctly." Really? I was surprised to hear her mention someone with the same name as Derek, the new hire in my department. Looking uneasy, Molly rubbed her arms and continued, "He was relentless. I even lied about having someone I liked, but he kept asking me out. Some might say he was determined, but in reality, he was just stubborn. I wonder if Derek's the same way. It's hard to say if they're the same person, but Derek sure is stubborn. He rarely budges on his opinions. And it's exhausting dealing with him every day." Not knowing how to handle Derek's challenging personality, I felt overwhelmed. Perhaps noticing my frustration, Molly gently changed the subject. "By the way, how's the restaurant you're helping out on your days off?" She was referring to the place I'd been assisting temporarily. "It seems things are finally getting back on track. They should be hiring new staff within a few days." That's a relief. I had been helping out at a friend's restaurant on my days off. Several of their employees had come down with a bad flu, leaving them severely understaffed. Though busy with my own job, I stepped in because my friend was in a real bind. Kindness always finds its way back to you. One day, someone will surely help your company in return. Molly gave me a warm smile as she cleared the dishes. Her words about kindness reminded me of Foster Foods, the company that had once helped my father's business. A bit of empathy can go a long way in saving someone during difficult times. Thinking about this, I felt the stress from my day gradually start to lift. Incidentally, a few days later, I learned from Derek that his father worked at Foster Foods. Apparently, his father was in the same department Molly had mentioned, confirming that her story about the stalker was indeed true. Derek seemed unaware of this part of his father's past, though. After talking to Molly, I decided to keep a closer eye on Derek's behavior. He often opposed my methods, but he seemed to get along with the other employees. However, he frequently criticized me to the new hires. "Kirk's methods are such a hassle. Can you believe we're stuck with him as our manager? My way would obviously work better than these outdated techniques." "Yeah, you're totally right, Derek. Can't believe Kirk won't acknowledge Derek's methods, he's just narrow-minded." Derek had been rallying the new employees, pointing out what he considered to be my flaws. He even complained to my father, the CEO. "The head of our department is awful. You've got to hear this. You seem to have a lot to say about my son lately." "More complaints, I take it?" "Yes, he never listens to my ideas." Because of that, I ended up causing trouble for my father. When he called out of concern, I was filled with a deep sense of guilt. Derek's problematic behavior will likely need to be addressed as soon as possible. At the time, I was prepared to let things go if Derek was willing to apologize. Everyone makes mistakes. I didn't want to be the kind of manager who dismisses someone without giving them a chance to improve. But then, a few months after the new hires joined, an incident occurred. It was during lunch break. Unexpectedly, Molly visited the office. Braving the summer heat, she had come to check on me, knowing I'd been extremely busy lately. "Here, I brought you some ice cream. I remember you like mint chocolate chip, right? I got 10, so please share them with the team." "Thank you. This really helps. But are you sure you're okay?" "I had something to eat at the cafe, so I'm fine." "Still, it must have been tiring. You should cool off here in the office a bit before heading back. The distance from home to the office isn't exactly close." Without a car, Molly likely took public transportation. Looking closer, I noticed she was sweating. I guided her to an empty conference room, intending to put the ice cream in the freezer. Just as I was about to leave, Molly's phone rang. "Oh, it's from your family. I wonder why they'd call my phone." Puzzled, Molly answered the call. Not wanting to interrupt, I quietly stepped out of the room. About 30 new employees came shuffling in. Leading the group at the front was Derek. Out of nowhere, he hurled an accusation at me. "Kirk, we can't work here any longer." "What?" The shock of his words left me speechless. I hadn't even had time to pick up the box of ice cream I dropped as Derek continued his tirade. It seems he'd seen me helping out at the restaurant and completely misinterpreted the situation. "The company's financial state isn't good, is it? I saw you working another job recently. Things must be so bad that you're forced to take on extra work." "No, there's a reason." I hurried to clear up his misunderstanding, but Derek quickly talked over me, as if determined to silence me. His actions made it clear that he wasn't interested in any explanation, he just wanted to drag me down. Looking at me with a smug expression, he raised his voice even more. On top of that, I heard you're in a loveless marriage and have been forcing other companies into deals to keep us afloat. My father told me everything. If that's what it takes to keep this company running, then there's no future here. Derek's father is a manager at Foster Foods, so it's possible he'd have access to certain details about our company. I don't know the exact power dynamics within that company, but given his past of stalking Molly, he might have done some digging himself. It wasn't surprising that Derek's father seemed well informed about things on our side. The other new hires nodded along in agreement, following Derek's lead as he condemned me. At that moment, another issue surfaced. Molly emerged from the conference room, her face pale. She walked up to me and whispered, "Your father collapsed. He was taken to the hospital, but he didn't make it." "What?" "Your mother thought you wouldn't be able to stay calm if she told you herself, so she called me instead." The sudden news hit me hard, and I sank to my knees as my vision went dark. The only thing keeping me grounded was the feeling of Molly's hand, gently comforting me. "Your father's last words were that he wanted you to take over the company. According to your mother, he'd been suffering from overwork for a while. He collapsed while handling work outside the office." Even Derek and his followers went silent in the face of this news. But Derek wasn't done yet. He turned to the other employees and addressed them. "I feel for him, but we need to think about our own futures. If someone like him becomes CEO, then this company has no future. Don't you all agree?" "Yeah, Derek's right. We can't make a living if we stay here." Encouraging the uncertain employees, Derek turned back to me, his voice resolute as he threw something down in my direction. "We're leaving and taking half the staff with us." A flurry of envelopes scattered in front of me. Each was marked resignation letter. Half. That meant Derek had thrown down 30 resignation letters. Losing almost half of the company's workforce would be a severe blow. "It seems like karma has finally caught up with you for deceiving us. You ignored my advice, and your father was no better. Maybe his passing was simply the punishment he deserved. We're leaving this company, and there's nothing you can do about it." I tried to face Derek seriously, but clearly, none of it had reached him. No longer caring to respond sincerely, I gave a dismissive answer and turned my back on them. "Go right ahead." "Huh? Did Derek actually expect me to try to stop him?" His baffled expression was almost comical. "Don't pretend you're not worried. I know you're panicking on the inside." Looking skeptical, Derek said this before leading the 30 employees out of the building. It appeared he hadn't been bluffing. When I checked the resignation letters he'd thrown down, I saw that each one was properly signed. But they'd come to regret this decision soon enough. No, I'd make sure of it. I'd work hard as CEO, prove myself, and show everyone, including those who left, what they missed out on. With renewed determination, I reached for the box of ice cream that had been left behind. The time spent had caused it to melt, and sticky liquid was already seeping through the cracks in the box. Several months later. Since Derek and the others had left, I'd been working alongside new employees. There were moments when I'd worried about the company's future, but things were going well. Our work was steady, and our client list was growing. Molly constantly reminded me not to overwork myself like my father had, so I reached out to various people for help. I even asked former employees to return, brought in help from a friend who owned a restaurant, and relied on every connection I had. Thanks to those efforts, the company entrusted to me by my father continued to thrive. With a major business deal underway, the company's future was looking secure. One day, the former new hires returned to the office, looking visibly uncomfortable. They bowed their heads in apology, one after another. "We're sorry. Is there any chance we could take back our resignations? The company we were supposed to join suddenly told us they didn't know who we were." It was Foster Foods. Most of those who resigned planned to join Foster Foods Company. This was something they casually mentioned when they were leaving this company. But since Foster Foods had a close relationship with me, they hadn't accepted those who'd chosen to abandon my company. Derek should have been aware of this, but he likely kept it to himself, prioritizing his desire to harm my reputation over being honest with the others. Those who left, thinking Foster Foods was waiting for them, had been played by Derek's manipulations. We're truly sorry. Could you possibly take us back? Please. Among those apologizing, one person stood out, looking particularly uneasy. It was Derek. But unlike the others, his expression wasn't one of apology, he was glaring at me with unmistakable resentment. Derek was clearly hostile. Your performance in our interview was poor, Derek. But I understood that as new graduates, you'd have your weaknesses, and I hired you despite them. Other companies simply weren't as forgiving. No, that can't be. Derek's face twisted in disbelief, and he muttered, "This has to be a lie," before storming toward me. Hey, you must have done something. This is all your fault, isn't it? I quietly stepped aside to avoid him and turned my attention to the others, who continued to apologize. Are you all serious about making a fresh start here? Yes, we've come back to make up for our mistakes. After seeing how other companies operate, we realized this was the best place for us. People make mistakes. I didn't hold it against them for getting the wrong idea, that was human nature. But spreading unverified information as fact, that was unacceptable. Do you understand what went wrong? Yes. We now know you were only helping out a friend's restaurant. We've looked into everything Derek told us since then. We can't believe how foolish we were at the time. If they truly intended to reflect and start over, I wasn't about to deny them a second chance. I addressed the apologetic new hires. I'll conduct another interview, so come to the office at the time I'll be providing shortly. Relief washed over their faces as they thanked me, visibly grateful. But as for Derek, I had nothing to offer him. It wasn't just that he left the company, I couldn't forgive the way he insulted my father. Finally, I turned my gaze toward him. Derek, during your time here, you often spoke disparagingly of me as your manager. And your insults toward my father cannot be overlooked. I won't tolerate anyone who disturbs the workplace atmosphere and manipulates their peers. Derek shot me a fierce glare, then turned his back. I'd never work under you again, anyway. But mark my words, I'll get my revenge. With that, he walked out. I didn't know what he might be plotting, but for the sake of my company and employees, I resolved to stay vigilant. Despite the lingering worry over Derek, I threw myself into work. We had several big projects underway, including a major business deal and a new product launch. By the time I got home, it was usually around midnight, but even at that hour, Molly would be up waiting to greet me. I can't thank her enough for reheating dinner and preparing a warm bath for me. I decided to ask her something that had been on my mind for a while. Molly, I know our marriage was initially out of convenience for both of us. But how do you feel about it now? Why do you ask all of a sudden? Molly was chuckling softly, but she must have realized that I was serious. She responded with a serious expression on her face. I do love you, you know. Even if the initial reason was more practical, like dealing with my stalker. I feel the same way. Hearing her honest answer, I felt a wave of relief. Looking at her warm smile, I felt my heart ease. I realized I'd felt this way soon after our marriage. If I'd shared my feelings back then, I wouldn't have had to carry around this uncertainty. Now that we know we're on the same page, how about we take a trip somewhere together? Sure, where should we go? Why don't you choose? I'm not very good at this sort of thing. Having something to look forward to would motivate me even more with work. There's a new hot springs resort that just opened last month. I've been wanting to go. A hot spring, sounds great. I'll make sure to clear my schedule. Molly beamed with excitement. And there's a popular restaurant nearby that's tough to book. Let's try it while we're there. We ended up talking about our trip plans until dawn. 3 years passed. Since that day, Derek never returned to my company, but his name started circulating within the industry. It seems that Derek has gone ahead and started a new company. His company is rapidly growing and making a strong impact in our industry. Then, one day, he suddenly approached my company with a business proposal. He wanted to sell us essential seasoning ingredients for processed foods at exorbitant prices. Naturally, the sales team, knowing the history, turned him down, but Derek was relentless. He continued contacting the sales team under various pretenses, disrupting their work. Apparently, he often argued with our salespeople, saying, "Why won't you agree to a deal? I'm going out of my way to reach out here." Sure. It might be a bit pricey, but this is from a famous company. I heard he even came close to physically intimidating one of our employees. At first, I thought he was just trying to waste our time and hinder our operations, but it seemed I'd misjudged his intentions. When I met with him at his office, he confidently explained his reasoning. "My company is about to become number one in this industry. If you think about it, the smart move is to partner with me now. Isn't that obvious? The food industry is buzzing about my company. Once I'm on top, it'll prove I was right all along." It seemed clear that he wasn't just trying to pull us down, he genuinely wanted to assert his superiority over my company. And above all, he still couldn't bring himself to acknowledge his own mistakes. It would have been ideal to secure a deal with such a promising company, but I turned it down. The reason was that the employees at his company looked completely lifeless. Watching them walk down the hallways with pale faces and blank expressions, I realized this company had no future. And as it turned out, my intuition was right. Derek's rapidly growing company hit a major decline at one point. One by one, employees started quitting, and the business couldn't stay afloat. Apparently, Derek's approach was extremely forceful, and he was making his employees work to the breaking point. Former employees, now working elsewhere, mentioned that working there felt like being in a black company, a term for toxic workplaces. Nobody could keep up with the endless hours Derek demanded, and eventually, they all left. Now, his company is on the brink of bankruptcy. However, it seems Derek couldn't understand why this was happening. He even went to the homes of those who left, trying to persuade them to come back. Despite his efforts, not a single person returned. Then one day, I happened to run into Derek wandering aimlessly through town, so I decided to have a talk with him. "Derek, can we talk for a bit?" "What, did you just come here to mock me?" "Not at all. Let's sit in that nearby park and talk." We walked over to a park bench and sat down. Since we weren't on friendly terms for idle chit-chat, I got straight to the point. "You don't understand the value of people because you only see them as pieces on a board for your own use." I told him what I'd felt for a long time. Derek looked at me, surprised. "What did you just say?" "Also, you're too convinced that your way is the only right one. There's wisdom to be learned from others' methods." "So, you're saying I was foolish?" He probably hadn't realized his own flaws until now. I could see the irritation as he ran his hands through his hair. "So you're saying I should just lower myself to accommodate foolish people?" "That's not it. It means you should respect other people's ways and not force your own approach on everyone. Not everyone has the same abilities. So basically, you're saying my failure is my own fault." With a self-deprecating tone, Derek muttered that he should have paused to reflect before things got to this point. But because he couldn't recognize his own shortcomings, this was the result. Looking downcast, Derek murmured quietly, "Why did you even bother talking to me?" "Because you're still young. You can start over. It would be a waste to let this be the end." After a brief moment of thought, Derek wiped his eyes and stood up. "I shouldn't be sitting here. I need to get back and turn things around." Seeing a hint of life back in his expression, I simply nodded. I'm glad to hear that. I hoped my words had given him a little bit of encouragement. Afterward, Derek seemed to struggle quite a bit. But he changed his attitude, hired new employees, and managed to avoid bankruptcy. He even visited my company with a box of sweets to apologize. Back then, I was wrong to deceive people into quitting for my own gain. I'm truly sorry. At first, the former employees who joined my company were angry, but most of them have now forgiven him. I think Derek will be fine now. He should be able to work while genuinely caring for his employees. I hope he builds a good company from here on. As for me, with things at my company calming down, I decided to go on a date with Molly. We'd lived without really speaking honestly with each other, so there's a lot I want to discuss. The day before our date, as I finished work early to head home, the employees called out to me. "Good luck on your date with your wife tomorrow. Thank you for all your hard work. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you all for your help, too. Make sure you all take breaks when you need them." It's easy to grow arrogant when you're in a position of power, but I resolved to keep myself grounded and always value my employees. With that thought in mind, I set off, feeling excited for my date with Molly.